The Dionysian Mysteries were a ritual of ancient Greece and Rome which used intoxicants and other trance-inducing techniques to remove inhibitions and social constraints, liberating the individual to return to a natural state. It also provided some liberation for those marginalized by Greek society, women, slaves and foreigners. In the final phase, the Mysteries shifted their emphasis from a chthonic, underworld orientation to a transcendental, mystical one, with Dionysus changing his nature accordingly, by its nature as a mystery religion reserved for the initiated. Many aspects of the Dionysian cult remain unknown and were lost with the decline of Greco-Roman polytheism. Modern knowledge is derived from descriptions, imagery and cross-cultural studies. Origins. The Dionysian mysteries of mainland Greece and the Roman Empire are thought to have evolved from a more primitive initiatory cult of unknown origin, which had spread throughout the Mediterranean region by the start of the classical Greek period. Its spread was associated with the dissemination of wine of sacrament or entheogen, with which it appears always to have been closely associated. Beginning as a simple rite, it evolved quickly within Greek culture into a popular mystery religion, which absorbed a variety of similar cults in a typically Greek synthesis across its territories. One late form was the Orphic Mysteries. However, all stages of this developmental spectrum appear to have continued in parallel throughout the Eastern Mediterranean until late in Greek history and forcible Christianization. Early Dionysus cult. The ecstatic cult of Dionysus was originally thought to be a late arrival in Greece from Thrace or Asia Minor, due to its popularity in both locations and Dionysus's non-integration into the Olympian pantheon, after the deity's name was discovered on Mycenaean Linear B tablets. However, this theory was abandoned and the cult is considered indigenous, predating Greek civilization. The absence of an early Olympian Dionysus is today explained by patterns of social exclusion and the cult's marginality, rather than chronology. Whether the cult originated on Minoan Crete or Africa, or in Thrace or Asia, as a proto-Sabazius, is unanswerable, due to lack of evidence. Some scholars believe it was an adopted cult not native to any of these places and may have been an eclectic cult in its earliest history, although it almost certainly obtained many familiar features from Minoan culture. Role of wine. The original rite of Dionysus is associated with the wine cult, concerned with the grapevine's cultivation and an understanding of its life cycle and the fermentation of wine from its dismembered body. Most importantly, however, the intoxicating and disinhibiting effects of wine were regarded as due to possession by the god spirit. Wine was also poured on the earth and its growing vine, completing the cycle. The cult was not solely concerned with the vine itself, but also with the other components of wine. Wine includes other ingredients adding to its quality, flavor and medicinal properties. Scholars have suggested that, given the low alcoholic content of early wine, its effects may have been due to an additional entheogenic ingredient in its sacramental form. Honey and beeswax were often added to wine, introducing an even older drink. Karoli Koeni postulated that this wine law superseded early Neolithic mead law involving bee swarms associated by the Greeks with Dionysus. Mead and beer were incorporated into the domain of Dionysus, perhaps through his identification with the Thracian corn deity Sabazius. Other plants believed to be viniculturally significant were also included in wine lore, such as ivy, the fig and the pine. The bull and goat were also part of the cult, eventually seen as manifestations of Dionysus. Some of these associations had been linked with fertility deities and became part of his new role. An understanding of Vinic cultural lore and its symbolism is key to understanding the cult which emerged from it, assuming a significance other than winemaking that would encompass life, death and rebirth, and providing insight into human psychology. Assuming the Dionysus cult arrived in Greece with the importation of wine, it probably first emerged about 6000 BC in one of two places, the Zagros Mountains and borderlands of Mesopotamia and Persia, or from wild vines on the mountain slopes of Libya and other regions in North Africa. The latter provided wine to ancient Egypt, wine from about 2500 BC, and was home to ecstatic rites involving animal possession, notably the goat and panther men of the Sufi cult of Morocco. In any case, Minoan Crete was the next link in the chain, importing wine from the Egyptians, Thracians and Phoenicians and exporting it to its colonies. The mysteries probably took shape in Minoan Crete from about 3000 to 1000 BC, since the name Dionysus exists nowhere other than Crete and Greece. Rites. The rites were based on a seasonal death-rebirth theme and spirit possession. The Osirian Mysteries paralleled the Dionysian, according to contemporary Greek and Egyptian observers. Spirit possession involved liberation from civilization's rules and constraints. It celebrated that which was outside civilized society and a return to primordial nature, which would later assume mystical overtones. It also involved escape from the socialized personality and ego into an ecstatic, deified state of the primal head. In this sense, Dionysus was the beast god within, or the unconscious mind of modern psychology. Such activity has been interpreted as fertilizing, invigorating, cathartic, liberating and transformative. So it is not surprising that many devotees of Dionysus were those on the margins of society: women, slaves, outlaws, and foreigners. All were equal in a cult that inverted the roles, similar to the Roman Saturnalia. Although the Greek Dionysian rites were associated with women, the cult offices' titles were of both genders, belying the claim that the cult was solely for women. The trance-induction central to the cult involved not only chemognosis, but an invocation of spirit with the bull roarer and communal dancing to drum and pipe. The trances are described in familiar anthropological terms, with characteristic movements found today in Afro-American Vodou and its counterparts. As in Vodou rites, certain rhythms were associated with the trance. Rhythms are also found preserved in Greek prose referring to the Dionysian rites. This collection of classical quotes describes rites in the Greek countryside in the mountains, to which processions were made on feast days. Following the torches as they dipped and swayed in the darkness, they climbed mountain paths with head thrown back and eyes glazed, dancing to the beat of the drum which stirred the blood. In this state of ecstasis or enthusiasmos, they abandoned themselves, dancing wildly and shouting "Oi!" and at that moment of intense rapture became identified with the god himself. They became filled with his spirit and acquired divine powers. This practice is demonstrated in Greek culture by the bacchanals of the Maenads, Theades and Bacchoi. Many Greek rulers considered the cult a threat to civilized society and wished to control it. The latter failed. The former would succeed in the foundation of a domesticated Dionysianism as a state religion in Athens. This was but one form of Dionysianism, a cult which assumed different forms in different localities. The Greek Bacchoi claimed that, like wine, Dionysus had a different flavor in different regions, reflecting the mythical and cultural soil. He appeared under different names and appearances in different regions. Mystery and public rites. The Dionysian Mysteries are believed to have consisted of two sets of rites, the secret rites of initiation and the public rites, or Dionysia. The public rites are believed to be the older of the two. In Athens and classical Attica, the main festivities were held in the month of Elaphebalion. The greater Dionysia had evolved into a dramatic festival. Dionysus was the god of acting, music and poetry for the Athenians, and the festival became an urban carnival. Its older precursor was the Lesser Dionysia, which preserved ancient customs centered on celebrating the first wine. This festival was timed to coincide with the clearing of the wine, which occurred during the first cold snap after the winter solstice, when Dionysus was said to be reborn. In contrast with the daytime festivities of the Athenian Dionysia were the biennial nocturnal rites of the Tristeria, held on Mount Parnassus in winter. These celebrated the emergence of Dionysus from the underworld, with orgies in the mountains. The first day was presided over by the Manads in the state of Meinomenos, during which animals, and perhaps humans, were hunted, torn apart with bare hands and eaten raw. This was the Sparagimos, once associated with goat sacrifice and marking the harvest of the vine. The second day saw the Bacchic nymphs in the Theaidic state. Although still orgiastic, this was a more sensual and benign bacchanal. Mythographers claimed that the Manads resisted the Bacchic urge and were driven mad, while the Theaides accepted the Dionysian ecstasy and kept the sanity, while the Athenians celebrated Dionysus in various one-day festivals. A far older tradition was the two-year cycle, where the death and absence of Dionysus was mourned for a year. During the second year, his resurrection was celebrated at the Tristeria and other festivals. Why this period was adopted is unknown, although it may have reflected a long fermentation period. All the oldest Dionysian rites reflected stages in the wine production process. Only later did the Athenians synchronize the Bacchic festivities with agricultural seasons. The first large-scale religious worship of Dionysus in Greece seems to have begun in Thebes about 1500 BC, around 1,000 years before the development of the Athenian Mysteries. Cultic worship of Dionysus was performed in the earliest Dionysian temples. Its first rituals probably originated in the Mycenaean period, but were probably similar to rites still held on Greek islands such as Chios and Tenedos. Here the first wine was offered to Dionysus and the now growing vine. A bull was sacrificed with a double axe, and its blood mixed with the wine. There are indications that at one time the sacrificer of the sacred bull was himself then stoned to death, although this became a symbolic act quite early. The more economical practice of goat sacrifice was later added to the rites. The goat was regarded as a manifestation of Dionysus. However, it was also seen as the killer of the vine by eating it. Welcome in times of pruning, less so in times of growth. The death of the goat could thus be interpreted as a combined sacrifice of Dionysus and the sacrificer. The goat was usually torn apart, as the vine had been at harvest. Other archaic rites found on Greek islands include festivals to his consort Ariadne, which include a tree-swinging game. In Rome, the Bacchanalia were held in secret and originally attended by women only. They were held over 3 days, in the grove of Simula near the Aventine Hill. Admission to the rites was then open to men, and celebrations took place 5 times a month. Initiation could take place at any of these times. Within the public rituals were the secret rites of initiation, the public festivals largely setting the stage for these private rites. Whatsoever may have remained to represent the original intent of the rites, regarded as rites of initiation. The externalities and dominant practice of the festivals were orgies of wine and sex. There was every kind of drunkenness and every aberration of sex, the one leading up to the other. Over all reigned the phallus, which, in its symbolism a rebors, represented post-ejaculation the death state of Bacchus, the god of pleasure, and his resurrection when it was in forma erecta. Of such was the sorrow and of such the joy of these mysteries. The phallus appears to have been a connecting link between the outer and inner rites. Not only was it prominent in the Bacchic carnival in Rome, it also appears to have been the secret object in the Leanon. Other possible contents could have been sacred fruit, leaves or loaves. Some sources suggest that the phallus was made from fig wood, while even older sources indicate it may have once been the phallus of a sacrificed goat. The contents probably changed over the centuries and in different modes of initiation, the general idea being that the final stage of the initiation involved the revelation of the god in one form or another. Temple and offices. The sacred loci of the Dionysian Mysteries have varied over time and place, as the rituals themselves have. The earliest rites took place in the wilderness, in the forests, the marshes and in the mountains. Later the priest would simply cast his staff into the ground at a suitable location, and hang a mask and animal skin from it. The circle around this center was the sacred precinct for however long the staff remained. This practice became archaic, but was revived by the nomadic healers of the Orphic Mysteries. In classical times temples were built for Dionysus, the earliest being circular buildings open to the sky, probably the origin of Greek theatres and forums, and later no different from any other Greek temple as Dionysus was assimilated. The Lenos also became a temple to Bacchus, and was often solely used as such. Underground chambers were often used for initiations, which may have originally taken place in natural caves. Although boundary zones were sacred to Dionysus, by the final days of the cult any temple could be dedicated or rededicated to him. Most mystery religions had a hierarchy of priests maintaining them, but it is uncertain if this was the case with the Dionysian Mysteries. The Orphic texts of the late period record a Boukelos as an offerer of sacrifice, sayer of prayers, and hymn singer, who seems to have been the equivalent of a priest. Other inscriptions record an archiboukelos presiding over the boukeloi. In some records there is also mention of boukeloi hieroi as well as hymnidi daskaloi. According to Athenian sources, when the Dionysus cult was state-controlled, a high priest and a high priestess were appointed as overseers. One late text describes a complex hierarchy of 3 archiboukeloi, 7 boukeloi hieroi and 11 boukeloi. The names of many senior priests and priestesses reveal them to be aristocrats. Although the high priest in at least one text has the name of a slave, there is no evidence of a complex hierarchy in the Bacchic mysteries of Rome, which seem to have been presided over by a domina and dominus. So it is possible that only the Athenian form of the mysteries and the Orphic religion had this structure. The original mysteries of Dionysus seem to have had no hierarchy at all, only ritual functionaries are mentioned, the rest being participant Bacchoi, Theades or Manads. However, a key role was always reserved for the heroes and his bride, and initiates may have played officiating roles in this process. Ritual details. Dionysian paraphernalia: canthros, drinking cup with large handles, originally the rhyton, later a kylix, or wine goblet; thyrsos, long wand with pine cone on top, carried by initiates and those possessed by the god; stave, once cast into ground to mark ritual space; crater, mixing bowl; flagellum, a scourge; minoan, double axe, once used for sacrificial rites, later replaced by the Greek opis; retis, hunter's net; laurel crown and cloak; purple robe, or lepidif or nscan nebix; hunting boots; persona masks, bull roarer, salpinx, long, straight trumpet, pan flute, tympanon, a frame drum, leanon, sacred basket with fig, traditional offerings to Dionysus, musk, civet, frankincense, storax, ivy, grapes, pine, fig, wine, honey, apples, Indian hemp, orchis root, thistle, all wild and domestic trees, black diamonds, animals sacred to Dionysus, the bull and goat and their enemies, the panther and the serpent, in addition, the fawn, deer, the fox, the dolphin, the lion, the bat and the bee. Invocation of Dionysus. I call upon loud-roaring and reveling Dionysus, primeval, double-natured, thrice-born, Bacchic Lord, wild, ineffable, secretive, two-horned and two-shaped, ivy-covered, bull-faced, warlike, howling, pure. You take raw flesh. You have feasts wrapped in foliage, decked with grape clusters. Resourceful Euboleus, a mortal god sired by Zeus, when he mated with Persephone, an unspeakable union. Hearken to my voice, O blessed one, and with your fair girdle nymphs breathe on me in a spirit of perfect ege. In intoxication, physical or spiritual, the initiate recovers an intensity of feeling which prudence had destroyed. He finds the world full of delight and beauty, and his imagination is suddenly liberated from the prison of everyday preoccupations. The Bacchic ritual produced what was called enthusiasm, which means etymologically having the god enter the worshipper, who believed that he became one with the god.